Hello, I'm Gail Christopher, one of the principal developers of the Americans All National Education Program. And we're here today to engage in a community dialogue about diversity and democracy, two critical concepts, two critical factors in terms of our healthy society. I'd like to welcome all of you and thank you for coming. And I want to thank the Hitachi Foundation, which was a key sponsor of the development of these resources and is a key sponsor of today's conversation. Would you introduce yourselves and we'll begin our conversation.
My name is Vanessa Sanchez and I am an East High SAP member. As someone with a Hispanic and Caucasian background, I feel that diversity and democracy are important tools that American students need to be educated on, and I feel that the Americans All Foundation will aid that and contribute to the betterment of our society in being diverse and unified. So,
thank you. Would you pass the mic on? Thank you.
My name is Jeff Conan, and I'm a SAP member as well at East High. And I find as a student, many other students are kind of lost and don't know how to achieve diversity and don't know how to engage in it. And so I think that Americans All materials in the classroom will really help that and find a path for other students who want to achieve diversity.
I am Montera Bilevan, and I'm also from East High. Diversity is a major issue at our school, and in my life, I'm a first-generation Asian American, so dealing with the conflict of having to almost assimilate into American culture, as well as having a strong heritage with my parents, I'm drawn to help the struggle for acceptance and understanding, and I believe it is through education that we can attain such a world where we don't have to fight about our color or our financial standings, and an organization like Americans All will help achieve that, as Vanessa said.
My name is Paul Babish, and I'm Vice President of United Teachers of Wichita, the teachers union. And of course I deal with democracy and diversity every day. Our school district is not only very diverse student-wise, but our members have that same diversity, and they approach their jobs with all different kinds of backgrounds that we need to be aware of. So we're in the schools every day dealing with the daily problems that people have in schools, and a lot of that revolves around diversity, training, and of course the very existence of the union is a key part of democracy, we think, and of course we're there every day.
I'm Susie Allstrand, Vice President of the Wichita Area Chamber of Commerce, and one of my areas of specialty is really what's happening in the K-12 system in Sedgwick County here. I look at what's happening in our education systems really as the bedrock for what our future is going to be in the community as far as economic development. And as far as students coming out of our schools, we want students that are going to be able to have those workplace skills and get along with people so that they can be good, productive workers in our future. So what is happening in the K-12 system really is what the future of our community is going to be.
Thank you.
I'm Tim Norton. I'm chair of the Sedgwick County Commission. I've been a city council member, a small town mayor, and now a county commissioner, so I've been through several levels of government. And what I've always said is that where government touches the people, democracy is delivered. And I'm so upset about the disconnect of people with government, which means there's a disconnect from democracy. And we really have to work hard to get that back into the generations of people that are coming up through the system so they understand that democracy is delivered every day in communities. It is not a philosophical kind of thing that's holistic. It is in the local communities where people work together to make this system work.
Okay, we're going to hear from the other side. Yes.
My name is Larry Garcia. I'm the fire chief of the city of Wichita, and in that activity, providing fire services to this community, it's important for us to be reflective of the community in terms of our diversity. Most importantly, because every day there are members of our department that will have a very direct effect on citizens of this community, or having the worst day of their lives in many instances. And so the compassion and the sensitivity that we have been able to bring in training and other aspects of their growth in our department as a member of this community, as well as a person that is required to meet the demands of the public for their care and comfort. And so we're very sensitive. It's important to us, and we want to do everything we can to make sure that our people reflect that sensitivity.
Thank you.
I'm Jim Moore, and I'm director of the Wichita Community Foundation, which is a public foundation that grants approximately $2.5 million per year back to our community, to our nonprofit community. The issues of democracy and diversity happen in our shop all the time, because particularly from the standpoint of two of our important roles. One is educating our donors and helping provide information to our donors about this community's needs, because philanthropy is truly a democratic concept. I mean, it's for the most part unique even to this country. So we deal with that issue, but then with respect to the nonprofits to whom we make grants, diversity is a part of so many of their organizations. Some of them are diversity-specific organizations, but even the ones that are not still have to deal with those issues on an everyday basis as they seek to serve their clients. So this is a very, very important topic for us in the philanthropic arena as well.
Hello, my name is Sue Castile, and I'm the director of NCCJ, the National Conference for Community and Justice. And our organizational mission is fighting racism, bias, and bigotry, and we believe that we can accomplish that through education and conflict resolution. Americans All curriculum is so relevant to our organizational mission and the education of young people in our community, and I think it's a very exciting concept. In terms of democracy, our social capital has been declining over the past quarter century. Voter turnout, newspaper readership, overall civic engagement, and that's critical to an effective democracy. And we see that this curriculum can help engage students in a way that's necessary to continue an effective democracy in our country. We are diverse. Now, how do we go about building an increased understanding and respect for one another to have effective problem solving and community building? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kevis Harding, pastor at Delrose United Methodist Church, and also a member of the school board of USD 259. I'm delighted to be here because I truly believe that diversity is what we all need when it comes to coming to the table of opportunity. And if we can learn and teach one another the values of diversity, it can help us be better people in our community and in our world, which strengthens our democracy.
Hi, I'm Sharon Ferry. I'm the 6th District City Council representative for the City of Wichita. I'm very fortunate in that I represent one of the most culturally, ethically, and economically diverse districts in our city. With that does bring many issues, such as people who are very new immigrants to our country and our community, and how we go about meeting their basic needs, especially as a city, and bringing their children into our school district, helping them learn what they need to know, both to get a good job, to become productive citizens, and to understand how this country does work and the wonderful opportunities that they can have to be a part of the country and where the country goes through the democracy that we have.
Hi, I'm Ellen Cullen. I'm the co-founder with Gail of the Americans All National Education Program, and I established the People of America Foundation. Our concerns are really twofold right now. First, we have a rapidly changing demographic. So almost over half of the next decade student population will be non-Hispanic white, which is not a problem at all. It's just the fact that many kids are coming from a background that is not focused on democracy. So they have nobody to fall back on except the schools to teach them about a system they weren't born into. The second problem for us is that there's an unintended consequence with the No Child Left Behind legislation, which, although it focuses well on math, reading, and science, has left out the social sciences, the social studies, which carries the meanings of diversity. And it's really a situation where we're almost taking democracy for granted, and that's a very uncomfortable and a very dangerous thing to have happen.
Thank you. We're going to pass that back that way. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives professionally in terms of your work and the importance of these issues. The Americans All resources try to bring a very human face to what for some might be abstract terms, democracy and diversity. We really focus on the people who came to this country voluntarily, sometimes by force, and we tell very human stories because ultimately we have to touch the hearts of people in order to get them to really become motivated to change. And I'd like for you to think for a moment about at points in your life when, for you personally, the issue of diversity became paramount. We'll revisit democracy also, but for most people there's a point in their lives when the diversity issue became personally relevant. And I'd love for you to share with us an incident or a time when that might have been true for you. Any takers on that one? Okay.
As I said, I represent a very diverse district in the Wichita community. And I think when diversity first really hit me was when I moved into my neighborhood. I wanted an old Victorian house. I got that. And with that, though, came the neighborhood that was around it. It's extremely diverse. And my husband and I chose to send our daughters to the neighborhood school. It was something that most white people in my neighborhood do not choose to do. And so my children's first good friends were Hispanic, African American, Vietnamese, and it just finally made me think I'm living in a place that is what the world should look like.
Great, thank you.
Again, I'm coming from an economic development perspective, but we were looking very closely at the 2000 census, what that was going to mean to our community. And also we had, because I work at the Chamber, we're a business organization. And we started seeing Hispanic business owners coming to the Chamber saying, I want to be more mainstream, I want to do business in the community, how can I get that started? So that was a whole shift in our thinking to try to understand that culture, to try to understand their business, and to help them get into the mainstream of our local economy here. So that was probably the time that I just really started to notice that our community was dramatically changing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I grew up in the deep South in Arkansas, and I remember my first year back from college. It was the first year that Head Start was starting in the small towns in Arkansas, and I had a chance to be a Head Start counselor, and it was also the first year that they started the integration process in this small town that I grew up in Arkansas. And it washed over me that times were changing, that diversity was going to be valued, that everybody got to share the American dream, and I got to be at the kind of the seedling time of helping with that process in Arkansas. And it has always stuck with me that that was the beginning roots of sharing the American dream equally with people of different ethnicities and different cultures. And it's carried with me all these years, and I was probably 18 years old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I have numerous stories on diversity, but the one that I want to speak on is kind of present, and that is and when I ran for school board, I ran for school board at large, not particularly one area, as presumably African Americans usually run for District 1. And running for the at-large board seat is the whole city. Mm-hmm. And I knew our city was changing when I had people from the whole city coming to help. It was not just predominantly from District 1, which is considered the northeast area, but I was getting people from the west side of town, the east side of town, south and north, coming together, working with the campaign. And that was part of democracy. So you can see the tie-in of the diversity and democracy. But I believe it takes those type of things to take place in our community to see that diversity and democracy can work together.
Great.
Well, I don't know that I'd ever thought about that question until you posed it, but as I sit here and reflect, I grew up in Wichita, and I went to Wichita North High School, and I'm not saying that to give them a plug, although I thought it was a great place. But at that time, and it was the late 50s, early 60s, and North High School was truly an integrated school as opposed to a desegregated school. And we had significant populations of African Americans and Hispanics. And so it became an everyday kind of thing, but I don't think we ever capitalized on it at that time. We meaning school teachers and so on and so forth. It was never really talked about. It was just there, and it was just largely accepted by the entire student population. And so then I went into public education as a teacher and administrator, and now the work I do. So diversity has really always been a part of my evolutionary growing up cycle and professional work cycle as well.
Anybody?
Okay, and growing up, I always thought I had a very diverse experience. My father and grandparents were immigrants. I lived in the district that Sharon represents, and I always knew Hispanic kids and black kids and so forth. And then I started teaching in the public school, and when I started, the public schools in Wichita decided to, well, we were under a court order to desegregate. And it was very, very difficult, especially in the school where I was, where they weren't used to African American kids. And I realized that despite what I thought was a really good, diverse experience in my background, there was a whole lot more that I needed to do to become sensitive to different lifestyles and so forth. And it was really a lot of work, and I think I was pretty successful, but it took years of working with kids who come from a different culture to understand where they're coming from, to be patient with myself and with them. And then later in my career, lots of Asian refugees came to our school, and that took, you had to step up a notch there too, diverse-wise, and learn a lot of new ways of dealing with these particular people.
I'd like to pick up on your point about the work it took to become, one of the terms people use is culturally competent, to be able to be more effective with dealing with diverse groups. I'd like to emphasize work in terms of what did you do? How did you become more comfortable?
Well, as I look back on it, I listened to these people, and you just listen and listen and listen, and instead of making a rash judgment, when you're teaching, you're making 100 decisions a minute. Sometimes you just have to step back and say, no, I can't make that decision that way right now, because that'll just, it just doesn't jive with the way these people are thinking and talking, and you just have to step back and examine. And I know when the whole thing started, I had my worst experiences with young black girls. It was just a conflict. I'm white, they're black, I'm old, they're young. I don't know what it was. But at the end of my career, they were one of my most successful groups that I handled, because I learned mainly to listen to them and their parents, and figure out where they're coming from, what they're looking for, and try to help them get it.
All right. Yes.
I'm a firm believer in the premise that we're all products of our experience, our upbringing perhaps. I was born and raised in a very small farming community, western Kansas. Everybody in that town knew us. You talk about, you've heard this cliche, as I see it, takes a village to raise a child. Hey, let me tell you, they would jerk on you quick if they saw you misbehaving. Getting to the point, long story short, went into the Marine Corps, had some brutal experiences, learning experiences. Get out of the Marine Corps, come to Wichita, hire on as a firefighter. And there were things that I was experiencing, even in the entry process, that if we look at those things today, we would find our city liable for discriminatory practices. We had a segregated fire department. I was the first Hispanic that was ever hired in the history of this department. Assigned to a station, all-white station. Learned shortly after that assignment because I wanted to go where the African American were. They were in a brand new station. Had neighbors that would bring pies and, and I saw that kind of thing. And so I wanted to be there. And I talked to the chief about it. He called me in the office and said, hey, look, my understanding is you want to go to Station 3 and be with the African American, called them blacks or Negroes then. And I said, yes, that's where I'd like to be assigned. Well, let me tell you something. Think about this. We're going to try something different. So that was in 57, 59, we desegregated. And that was quite an experience, let me tell you. I won't go into a lot of detail, but again, the thing that I had to fall back on, much of what I learned about differences of people came from my family upbringing, and I was tolerant and sensitive, and I thank God for that kind of upbringing so that I could get through some of that stuff.
You've touched on some of the critical issues that we've tried to integrate into the Americans All resources. A big part of it is to focus on communication and good people skills, because we believe that's sort of the foundation. How effective are we as human beings, especially in our ability to communicate and to relate? So this is very helpful for us to hear. Yes, you want to?
Well, I was going to say, and I don't mean to oversimplify this, and I was going to emphasize the point you just made, because I think kids leaving school with effective communication skills is one of the 2 or 3 most important things that education ought to do today. But I reflect back on a time when I was a school principal here in the mid to late 70s. We were getting an influx of Asian families to the United States, and as some of the experiences we had then, and I think this has been repeated before and after, we just assumed that we had to cram the Caucasian culture down all of those who weren't like us. And I think we do a better job now of accepting people and honoring their cultures. Mm-hmm. I see that in the business place. I work downtown in a building where Excel is, and Excel features different populations, including disabled people. Every week something is going on that helps educate and bring about communication. The problem this curriculum probably has right now is not with its value and not with its subject matter, but it comes at a time when education is focused on objectives, outcomes, and we're dealing with a topic that in many cases is not measurable. Yeah. So you do not know when you've succeeded. You kind of know when you failed, but you don't always know how much progress you're making. And I would hope that educators and parents would try to focus on that issue and realize how important this is.
You've just opened up the key issue, which is how do you test this particular set of skills? Yes.
The moment, well, it wasn't really a moment when I paralleled with diversity, but it was a gradual change from kindergarten through 8th grade. I went to a rural school, and the demographics were 95% white, and so they weren't subjective, or they weren't accepting of differences. And so when I went to school, I would fear communicating with other students because of the harassment and pushing up against lockers, and every day fearing to go to school and communicating with other students and getting that confrontation. And so when I went to the Wichita public schools and seeing the diversity there and knowing that the world isn't all Caucasian and experiencing others bring to life and what they have to offer is where I saw that the world was a greater place.
Okay, thank you. One more student? Yes.
My first encounter with me being different, growing up, my father was in the military and the Air Force, so we traveled all around, and I was not in the States until 5th grade. And my teacher called me a wetback. And I didn't know what that was. I had never been confronted with the issue of me being different than someone else. And she called my good friend a cracker. So that was the first time that I had ever realized that I was different. And then going on to high school, I really saw that East High is very diverse, and my goal is just to promote the education of people and differences and celebrating. There's so many wonderful things we can learn from different cultures and different people that just make the world a better place. There's so much out there, and to appreciate the differences in cultures and to be comfortable and to really be able to communicate is a really important tool.
Thank you so much for sharing multiple perspectives, both professionally and personally. And the good news is your experiences are largely positive, and you all seem to be not advocates, but certainly on the same page as far as the importance of diversity in a democratic society. But we have some barriers, some challenges to face as far as really realizing the broader vision and the broader goal. We're going to take a break now, but when we return from the break, we're going to tackle some of those challenges and some of those barriers, and we want and welcome your input in helping us to develop a strategy. Hi, I'm Gail Christopher. Welcome back to our conversation, to our community dialogue on diversity and democracy. A few people have joined us during the break, and I'd like to ask you to introduce yourself, Dave, and tell us why these issues are important to you.
I'm Dave Franson from Bombardier Aerospace, and these issues are important to me because I work in a community, the aviation community, if you will, where diversity is an extremely important part of what we do. It's a global business. We run into a lot of people from a lot of different parts of the world, partly because we go to those places, but a lot of the reason is because they come here. I work in an international company. Bombardier is actually headquartered in Canada, but it owns companies from Ireland, from Canada, and from the United States. So in our flight test center here locally, I have the opportunity to interface with people with backgrounds that are very diverse. It's kind of interesting to me because I was a young man that was raised in a family that lived in an enclave, if you will, of lily white people. I went to a high school that had only white kids in it. And I went off to college and I started playing sports. And I became aware that there were people with other backgrounds, with ethnic diversity, with lots of different cultural experiences. And it was a broadening experience. And it made an impression on my life, which, by the way, has helped me a great deal with the business experience.
All right, thank you. We have someone else who's joined us, Bob.
My name is Bob Knight, and I've spent nearly the last quarter century in local government and having the privilege of serving my neighbors in city government. I come to this from a perspective of a person who's been shaped by some life experiences that pretty well reflect all of us in terms of how we end up the way we are. But I left home at an early age and lived in a hotel in downtown Wichita. And a large source of my financial support and certainly encouragement to stay in school came from African American bellboys that worked in this rundown hotel. So I learned early on the value of certainly deep friendships across racial lines and ethnic lines. But speaking more specifically about today, I have watched our city grow into a very diverse community, far different than when I was growing up. While we had some of the same elements, we didn't have the numbers, and it really mirrors America. And I think we ought to be celebrating this richness, this blessing, but we also, at the same time, have to figure out strategies of bringing unity to this diversity, and all of us being Americans pulling together, caring about each other. There's something very fundamental, I think, about America, and that is the fact that we ought to care about our neighbors. And a community is far more than unrelated strangers. It's people that that call the same community home. And it should have a richness and a depth that would guard against people being treated differently because of their religion or their race or their ethnicity.
We have one more new person. Jane?
My name is Jane Rand. I'm the Library Media Specialist at East High. And I have been teaching in Wichita Public Schools about 25 years. Without diversity, there's no need for democracy, because everyone would be the same size, the same shape. We would all look the same. We would all think the same thoughts. Now, that nation wouldn't live very long or go very far. There would be no inventions. There'd be no collaboration in ideas. There'd be no growth. So that diversity supports our democracy and makes all of us better.
Profound ideas. Thank you very much.